trade surplus between China and the U.S. has grown yet again, raising the possibility of fresh American retaliation. Where do we stand now with Donald Trump's America First policy? And following the first press conference this year of the Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council, we'll also be looking at where cross-strait relations now stand. Welcome to The Point. Live from Beijing, I'm Liu Xin. China's trade surplus with the U.S. expanded last year. The figures from China's General Administration of Customs on Friday showed although China's trade surplus with the rest of the world fell by 17%, its surplus with the U.S. expanded over 10% year-on-year to reach $275.8 billion US. Now, trade between the two countries has become a sensitive issue, with the U.S. President Donald Trump accusing Beijing of stealing U.S. jobs. During President Trump's November visit to Beijing, the two countries announced more than $250 billion US worth of business deals. But this increasing surplus is likely to give impetus to calls for more tough measures. Meanwhile, AT&T has scuppered a deal to collaborate with Chinese telecoms firm Huawei, while Alibaba has again been accused by the U.S. of selling counterfeit goods and blacklisted as a result. So just how bad are trade relations between the two countries, and do Donald Trump's accusations against China stack up? Joining me for the discussion are Dr. Liu Baocheng, Director of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics here in Beijing, and Dr. Christopher Smart, a Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, who spent 6 years in the Obama administration as a senior policymaker for international economic affairs. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Dr. Liu, first explain to us, please, how come the trade surplus between China has against the United States increased against the backdrop of decreasing surplus with the rest of the world?
Well, in the first place, we should really congratulate the United States for being able to buy more from China. And while the U.S. is really recovered more quickly than the rest of the world out of the financial crisis, and with the employment almost full, and with also the interest rate hike, and also people have better hope over the economic prospect, and also with the tax reduction program on our way. So only you have confidence, you can really spend tomorrow's money. So that's one thing. The other is that Chinese economy is performing pretty solid and resilient to to a number of disruptions. So the export drive is still there, and both the foreign invested companies in China and also homegrown companies, they have a stronger innovation, and so we are able to have more added value to the export.
Dr. Smart, how do our American friends look at the widening trade surplus with China? Is it being seen as a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I want to say thank you, first of all, for the words of congratulations, but we look forward to the day in the United States to be congratulating China on buying more exports from the United States. I think there is a tremendous focus on the bilateral trading relationship, a tremendous focus, perhaps too much of a focus, on the narrow bilateral balance between the two countries, because if you look at things more broadly, as you pointed out, China has a balanced relationship with its trading partners globally. But I think there is a great concern about the ability of American companies to sell into China for a variety of reasons related to its regulatory and legal environment. And there is a broader concern about the pricing of certain kinds of goods in certain industries in China, in particular steel and aluminum and a number of others, where the view is that the pricing and the support that the government offers those industries in China gives it an unfair advantage to the detriment of not just U.S. interests, but also European and other trading partners.
Dr. Liu, are these concerns anything new? What has been the Chinese perspective on these issues?
Well, the other reason that contributes to the trade deficit from the United States side is that we have far more U.S. investment in China, and China is still operating on OEM basis, which is really a contract manufacturing, and then sell back to the United States. And on the other side, China is also moving more drastically to have more direct investment in the United States, but given the number of hurdles that many Chinese businesses and investors have encountered, so there has been a really plummeting of the investment by 40% over the last year to the United States. So there's a better communication that is really needed between both at the government level and also at the business level.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Smart, how do you look at the kind of hurdles Chinese investors have been experiencing while trying to narrow that trade surplus? For instance, we know that AT&T has been urged to cut all commercial ties with Chinese phone maker Huawei and to oppose plans by telecom operator China Mobile to enter the U.S. market. There is also a blockage of Alibaba's efforts. There's also blockage of Ant Financial, another Chinese financial term, to acquire a U.S. money transfer company, MoneyGram International. How are you looking at these two efforts that are pulling away from each other?
Well, I can't comment on those particular deals in particular in themselves, but I think it is important to understand that there are concerns from the U.S. point of view when some of the major counterparts or the major investors from China are in fact state-owned enterprises or related to state-owned enterprises. Now, that's not the case for all of the deals that you've mentioned there, but it is a broader concern about how we create the rules for very large, very well-endowed state-owned enterprises that are making investments in the United States and indeed in Europe. The Europeans are talking about how to adjust their rules more broadly. I think just to broaden out the conversation a little bit, I think we need to understand that we have created a set of trade and investment rules around the world over the last many decades. China is a relative newcomer to those rules, and I think we're finding that China is a very different kind of economic and political system than the rules we're prepared to deal with. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. I think it's important for China to understand that some of these concerns that we are raising have to do with not just the United States, not just the Trump administration, but Europe, Japan, and others have similar concerns about the way the Chinese political and economic system leads to hidden subsidies for major competitors. If China were a smaller country, it wouldn't be such a big concern. But because of China's size and dynamism, I think we need to talk about these issues openly and frankly and find ways to come to terms with what is a very dynamic new player on the global economic scene.
Dr. Liu, what is your response to what Dr. Smart's answer?
Well, I think there is a general sentiment. Some of the Chinese accuse particularly the Trump administration as maintaining a sort of hegemonistic attitude. But I would read there is a general fear. When someone is close on a heel and you are the front runner, both in technology and also in the world leadership. So now the sudden rise of China is really posing fear not only to the United States but also to those who are really willing to see the status quo. And the other reason is that do the world have to follow a same formula for development? Today it is really a multipolar world. So a unipolar is really something in the past. It's the Cold War that people have to learn and adapt to this new reality.
Well, apart from these discussions, the problems on the surface have to be addressed one way or another. Dr. Smart, looking at the year 2018, what do you think is paramount for the two countries to do, especially against the speculation that there might be some kind of a trade war happening between the world's two largest economies?
Yeah, well, I think Dr. Liu is exactly right that we all need to think about adapting and understanding that the world is changing. But I think that also means that China needs to recognize that it has presented a challenge, and I don't mean that in an oppositional way, but it is a new and very different kind of economic and political player. That the current rules aren't really well adapted to engaging. And so this requires the United States and Europe to broaden out the conversation. I think it requires Chinese authorities also to recognize that they need to hear and listen to the concerns. Again, they're not just the concerns of the Trump administration, which has become very vocal and I think tendentious in a not very helpful way. But these were concerns that the Obama administration had, the Bush administration had, and again our European and Japanese counterparts feel that there are hidden subsidies in the Chinese system. There are advantages that Chinese companies have that give them an unfair advantage in the playing field, and we need to recognize that and find ways to address those issues.
Well, I think it is difficult to cherry pick what you want when you are cooperating with somebody. You can't say, I like this, I don't like that, because if you do not have the state-owned enterprises, the state of the Chinese economy would be totally different. Dr. Liu, what is your take on that? And from the Chinese perspective, what is the right way forward?
Well, clearly there are international laws that govern even if government, not to mention government-owned institutions, to engage in commercial dealings. They are subject to all the jurisdictions and they are subject to all the treaties and laws. So therefore, there should not be much of the concern from the Chinese side. And the other is that how the Chinese firms really behave in better communication, in better coordination and consulting with the department agencies, and also that we have to learn to engage with multi-stakeholders to really to put forward our position. So the lack of communication, the lack of transparency really create a lot of hurdles that are really not necessarily related to state-owned enterprises.
So indeed, something can be done there to help people better understand and build trust between the two sides. Many thanks to our guests. We have to leave it there. Dr. Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics, and Dr. Christopher Smart from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And you're watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after this. The first press conference this year of the Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council was held this Wednesday. The spokesman Ma Xiaoguang described the cross-strait relations in 2017 as a complex of twists and turns. He also speculated that 2018 would continue to face a lot of complexities and complications. Meanwhile, a survey published by United Daily News in Taiwan last November showed there was growing goodwill towards the Chinese mainland. And last year, nearly 6 million Taiwanese traveled to the mainland, a historic high. So looking forward, what is likely to happen to cross-strait relations? I'm joined by Dr. Zhong Houtao, a research fellow of the Institute of Taiwan Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and from Taipei by Joanna, a former Taiwan legislator. Welcome to both of you. Dr. Zhong, at the press conference that I mentioned, spokesperson Ma Xiaoguang described bilateral cross-strait relations as a complex of twists and turns. What are the main obstacles faced by the two sides in improving that relationship?
There are several obstacles for the future development of cross-strait relations. The biggest, I think, is the political aspect. That is, the Taiwan authority refused to accept 1992 consensus, and for this reason, the official dialogue between the two sides is compelled to be suspended. And another one is the economic aspect. Taiwan now is pursuing a new strategy named New southbound policy, but this policy, Taiwan is just trying to diversify Taiwan's investment from Chinese mainland to some South Asia countries and other South Asia countries and Southeast Asia countries, and is trying to weaken cross-strait economic relationship. And the third point in the military aspect, that is Taiwan is trying to increase Taiwan's spending on defense. It's just she just want to increase Taiwan's capability to defend itself, to oppose cross-strait reunification. So, and there are also some outer obstacles. For example, United States just passed a new act named the Taiwan Travel Act by the House of Representatives. So the outer obstacle could not be omitted or neglected.
Right, we're going to talk about later in the show. Joanna, how are Taiwanese media reporting on the state of cross-strait relationship last year? Can we read anything between the lines as to what we can expect in the coming year?
Well, certainly there are little room to be optimistic because there are two main obstacles. One is where mainland China focused on people-to-people exchange. It is very clear that the official exchanges are decreasing, even to the extent of completely ceasing. So people are worried about things falling back to the second track or third track, which is a major setback from the Ma Ying-jeou administration where we had government-to-government direct negotiation. The second one is increasing intervention of foreign powers, namely U.S. and Japan. And it is very clear that the United States is sending a lot of signals to the current Taiwan administration, and those are signals welcomed by the people, of course, because they are sending a lot of very warm signals to Taiwan. But furthermore, they are sending a strong signal to the extent of supporting Taiwan's ideological claim. And people believe that with such a strong support or signals of support, Taiwan will have little room to back down from a strong ideological position supporting the Taiwan independence stance. And that will be, of course, falling beyond mainland China's red line.
Right. Actually, there have been scholars on the Chinese mainland warning the consequences of that act once it is totally approved by the Senate and signed by the U.S. President into law. For instance, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Liu Baocheng expressed firm opposition to this as the act severely violating the One China policy and principles in the three China-U.S. joint communiques. So, Dr. Zhong, what kind of consequences are we potentially seeing if the act is really pushed through and becomes law? How badly is it going to affect not just bilateral, not just cross-strait relations, but China's relationship with the United States?
Yes, just as you said, the United States is undermining the One China principle or One China policy, which is written in the three joint communique between China and the United States. If the United States break One China policy, then the China and U.S. relationship will be overclouded. And then the China and U.S. cooperation on some international affairs, for example, the North Korea nuclear issue and some Palestine and Israel peace talk and some other international issues will also be greatly challenged. So this act, it does not only closely related to Sino and U.S. relationship, it is also closely related to world peace.
Joanna, some people are even cautioning that the act could derail or break China-U.S. diplomatic relations. What is your take on the severity of the consequences?
Well, to an extent that there are a lot of people who have very soft spots to Taiwan, and they've supported Taiwan years back. But these two are very severe. One is H.R. 535 and the other one is H.R. 3320. Both have gone beyond the current boundary conditions that set a peace and co-development route for cross-strait relations. The first one is welcomed by Taiwan because it allows high-level officer travel, which made it possible for us to even host conferences with high-level U.S. participation. However, I understand that mainland China has protested that very severely. The second one set up a rule for the Congress, from the U.S. Congress, to have a strategy to help Taiwan regain the WHA observer status and report directly to the Congress annually. With that, mainland China has once again protested strongly and also sent messages to Taiwan, a chilling message that says some of the rooms allowed to Taiwan, such as ICAO and WHA, will not be allowed if we try to push the boundary and push the envelope too far. So both seems to be very optimistic, very welcoming from the Taiwan perspective, has been very strongly objected by mainland China, and that certainly will send a shockwave to the cross-strait relations, which may not be beneficial to Taiwan at all.
Right. Besides these external factors on the island of Taiwan, let's take a look at the general sentiment in the vote that I mentioned in the beginning of the show. Taiwanese citizens have chosen the Chinese character Mang, which roughly translates to confusion, as their word of the year, and the result was released by the CTBC Foundation for Arts and Culture and the Taiwanese newspaper United Daily News at the end of last year. How do you look at this kind of choice by the people in their description of bilateral ties for 2017? Joanna.
In 2 consecutive days, Taiwan released its annual word as Mang. As you said, there are meanings like perplexed, directionless, at a loss, ambivalent, and those represent the zeitgeist, the general sentiment of Taiwan. People are concerned about where their own future and the island's future should be. At the next day, there is another word released by Cross-strait media that's jointly proposed by people across the Taiwan Straits, that is Chuang. That has 2 meanings. One is creative, innovative, constructive, and those, I think, I'm probably reflecting the sentiment from the mainland China's point of view, because 2017 was a year of rising. But also it means, in the first tone, Chuang, it means trauma, destruction. And I believe lots of people in Taiwan felt that the society is being split and hate mobilization was rampant. So while the same word was chosen by people across the Taiwan Straits, the meanings may be very different.
However, while the sentiment on the official level is problematic, on the people-to-people level, it seems to be a slightly different picture. Dr. Zhong, now, a commemorative event to mark the 30th anniversary of the opening of people-to-people communication across the strait was held last September, and Zhang Zhijun, head of the State Council Taiwan Affairs Office, said 9 million people travel back forth across the strait every year, and last year almost 6 million Taiwanese residents travel to the Chinese mainland, which is a historic high. How can you explain this enthusiasm for Taiwanese people to come to the mainland?
It means the people-to-people exchanges between the 2 sides has been increasing rather than decreasing. Actually, after Tsai Ing-wen taking her office in 2016, she has been taking some new policies and measures to cut off and at least to weaken the cross-strait non-official relations. For example, last year, Tsai Ing-wen authority released some new regulations and laws to punish those who traveled, those officers who travel to Chinese mainland, and restrict those retired officers who travel to Chinese mainland without Taiwan authority permission. So, but this we could find that the Taiwan common people are not is still willing to flush into Chinese mainland, and that is contrary to Tsai Ing-wen's original expectation. And what is more, I think the people-to-people exchanges has laid a good foundation for the future cross-strait relations. That is, no matter what kind of policy Tsai Ing-wen is taking, the people exchanges will continue to warm, and in future I think this will lay a strong foundation for the peaceful reunification.
Joanna, also another survey published by the same newspaper, United Daily News, showed that there has been growing goodwill toward the Chinese mainland, hitting an 8-year high. About 40% of the people on Taiwan are willing to work in China. However, some people are saying it's only a survey done with 1,000 people that doesn't represent the general picture. Tell us, what is your observation of the kind of general perception of the Taiwanese people towards the mainland? If indeed that survey is telling the truth, why the change?
Well, it's a standard survey in Taiwan. Generally, we do 1,087 and with a plus or minus 3% as the standard deviation. So that does reflect the regular survey poll in Taiwan. And I think it is very clear that in the new generation, the young generations, a lot of them have chosen to go to mainland China for their careers, professional or academic careers. Lots of them, regardless of their family's ideology or their political identification, even party identification, have recognized that mainland China is a rising power, a rising economy, and provides them with great opportunities academically or professionally. So in a sense, this is a typical voting by feet phenomenon that's currently happening in Taiwan. As more people go to mainland China, they will bring back accurate information about what the status of mainland China is. And I think that accurate information will help generations to come in terms of their decision on how to deal with cross-strait relations.
Yeah,
I think information will give people further understanding, will become the foundation of our relationship.
Dr. Zhong, what is the trend on the economic front telling us again about Taiwan's relationship with the mainland? I mean, the mainland and Taiwan have also the Chinese mainland is Taiwan's largest export market, and Taiwan also has the largest trading surplus with the mainland, right? So how is the situation on that front supporting the kind of people-to-people sentiment?
I think the cross-strait economic ties has been increasing, and this ties has become a propeller for cross-strait relationship. That means although the official dialogue has been suspended, but the non-official, especially the economic aspect, will continue to increase, and that will lay a solid foundation for the future cross-strait relations.
Thank you very much to our two guests, Dr. Zhong Houtao from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and from Taipei, Joanna Lei, a former Taiwan legislator. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. Follow me on Facebook or Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.